The crypto markets are rallying, and it all has to do with the fact that Jerome Powell and the Fed are handcuffed. And no, I'm not talking about bedroom time safe word action. I'm talking about the fact that the bond market gap is just too big. Banks are failing. We have to keep bailing them out. Crypto will rise temporarily while there's pressure put on the Fed to not raise rates. Let's get into a deeper explanation. The problem we got is banks and bonds. Silvergate, Silicon Valley, Signature Bank. Over the last several days, like the last week, we've had 2 out of the top 3 banks fail, all right? The reason these banks are failing, or part of the reason why these banks are failing, has to do with bonds, all right? Now, this is where the market is freaking out. This is why, okay, for those of you that are watching right now, this is why, all right? The market is going green temporarily. I am telling you this. Be very, very cautious. Be very, very cautious. So here's the setup. The reason the market is green this much right now is actually a problem. The reason it's a problem has to do with Jerome Powell and banks. Over the last week, you have had 2 out of the top 3 banks of all time fail in the United States. Part of the problems is when banks have cash, lots of cash. When old people, I remember my grandparents doing this, they had cash, you know what they would do? They would buy bonds. Now, a couple years ago, what happened was before the Rona, before the pandemic, oh, we're getting into it deep in the weeds here, ladies. All right, so before all that, what happened was when these banks had all this cash, when our grandparents had all this cash, some of you even got in this, you bought bonds. And when you bought bonds, you were buying them at 1%. This was a couple years ago, okay? Now the pandemic happens. Now the Rona happens, right? We've got lockdowns, we've got pseudoscience, we've got all sorts of funky stuff, people locking down the economy, stimmy checks all over the globe, fiat printed at a rate you've never seen anywhere. So now what happens is you've got a bigger ball of money. That bigger ball of money, we know about inflation. Jerome Powell's watching that, okay? Now here's the deal. Remember those banks that a couple years ago had all that cash? And when they had that cash, they're like, you know what, we need to put it somewhere safe, so we're going to put it in bonds. We'll earn our 1%, we're good to go. Well, now those banks like Signature, Silicon Valley, Silvergate, all needed to raise money. And they needed to raise money fast because people were taking money out. You had the crypto-tied banks that were crashing because of that. You had quasi-bank runs happening. USDC action, right? There was depegging going on. So now those banks that needed to raise money, and get ready because I'm going to blow your fucking minds here because you're going to learn why this is so bad for the market. So now these banks that had these bonds at 1% need to raise money. So what do? They want to sell those bonds. You know what though? Those bonds aren't worth what they paid for them. Yeah, bonds, which are supposed to be the most secured thing out there, aren't worth what they paid. The reason they're not worth what they paid for is because the new bonds, because Jerome Powell and the Fed have been jacking up rates, the new bonds are going for 5%. So these banks like Signature, Silvergate, right? The 2 out of the top 3 that failed. Those banks that had all that money put into bonds that needed to sell their bonds for cash because, to cover their withdrawals, their bonds are worth less. So now instead of their bonds being worth $1, each of those bonds now are maybe only worth 70 cents, 60 cents per dollar. Because now investors, people that buy bonds, don't want to buy bonds that are yielding 1%. They want to buy the bonds right now that they're doing. The bonds right now are going for 5%. So, those 3 banks, the reason the market is green right now, the reason the market is green is not what you think. The reason the market is green is because the market knows that Jerome Powell now has nasty pressure put on him to pause rate hikes. Because every time the Fed raises rates, remember I told you how stuff becomes more expensive? right? Your credit cards go up. All of that stuff goes up. Your home loans, your auto loans, all that becomes expensive. Well, guess what? The bond rate goes up too. So now all that money that these banks put into bonds when all that Rona money was printed is worth less now. Billions and billions of dollars tied up by all of these banks is worth less because their bonds, when they bought them, when they put their cash in at 1%, that bond now at 1% isn't worth shit. Because the new bonds that are being written are worth 5%. So now every time Jerome Powell raises rates, he makes that gap bigger. So instead of 5%, it'll be up here to 5.50, 5.5, then 6%, then 7%, then 8%. So that 1% bond, all that money that Silvergate, Signature had, all of that money right there is backed with a 1% bond that is worth junk. Now you've got these 5% bonds that everyone's buying. So and this is not just those three banks. This is all banks out there. Every bank out there that bought bonds, that is having a cash run, that is having a liquidity crunch, that made bad investments. All of those banks right now that took cash up to a couple years ago are in deep shit. If there is any money withdrawal on those banks right now, they're in deep trouble because the majority of their bonds were purchased at 1%. And when they go to sell those bonds to people that want to buy them, people are like, I don't want to buy your 1% bullshit. I want to buy the 5% bonds that are out in the market right now. Decline Management says in 1974, a mortgage secured with a 20% down payment was an 18% interest rate. Yeah, my dad got a business loan in the mid-70s, and his business loan was 21 or 22% to open up a franchise. It was nuts. Roman Empire chimes in with a nice super chat donation. Everyone, as standard on this channel, every time someone gives a donation, we thank that person. So let's all thank Roman Empire for helping out the team this Monday morning. Roman Empire says, hey, thanks for streaming. No, thanks for the super chat donation. Good, sir. I really appreciate that. So everyone, let's hit him up. Nico chimes in, stocks are important as you invest in helping a company grow. You have a slice of it. Crypto is the best custodian solution. No one can use your coins as collateral for monkey business. The thing is, Nico, we gotta get through this inflated money mess. And you're definitely welcome for the stream, Roman Empire. But that's the problem now. Every bank out there, and this is like, think of the majority of banks in the world, you guys, that got large chunks of cash during the Rona times. That cash, they didn't just let it sit there. They put it into bonds. Those bonds now are worthless. So now Jerome Powell's, I don't want to say a bad naughty word because I don't want to get demonetized. But holy crap, Jerome Powell now is in a big predicament. Because he needs to raise rates. For those of you watching, we need to raise rates. The reason we need to raise rates is this right here. Right there, and let's get the drawing tool out. Let's do it, guys. Come on, we're getting deep in the weeds. Roman Empire started us off good. We'll keep it rolling. So here's the problem, right? Here's that CPI data. Goes up, it goes down like this, and then you can see it flattens out, okay? If we get more CPI data that's flattened out, what's supposed to happen is Jerome Powell has to then raise rates, right, to combat that. The problem is Jerome Powell cannot raise rates as aggressively anymore. Because the reason those banks failed is because of how much they've raised rates. So for those banks, okay, there was an emergency meeting that happened over the weekend. All right, Janet Yellen, Fed came out and they said, hey, we're going to make the people that hold money whole. This is a very different bailout than 2008. In 2008, it was like a full-on through bailout, like legit, like bailout top to bottom, okay? This is very different. The bailout that was given, right, the assurance that was given by Janet Yellen, backed up by Fed, was that we are going to make the people's money, whoever has depositors' money in there, we're going to make whole. So not the salaries, not the bonuses, none of that stuff. Mac 420 chiming in. What's up, Mac? How's it going? So that's the big issue right now. Jerome Powell still has to raise rates to knock down inflation. And don't put nasty pressure on Jerome Powell, because remember, the only reason that Jerome Powell has to keep screwing with rates is because A, the government shut us down. B, the government was like, yo, let's print more money, baby. Even once the economy was open, let's just keep printing money. Oh, and let's just keep giving money to everyone else. Then on top of that, you had supply chain disruptions from all these businesses, whether they were in your country or globally, being shut down. Right? So that was a supply part of it that was screwed up on the supply and demand metric. So Jerome Powell, that's all he's got, guys. It's all he's got. He's got nothing else. Three Blind Mice, what's up from Minnesota? It's been a minute, bro. Glad to see you doing your thing. Keep it coming. Go XRP and XLM. Appreciate it. So what do you guys think of this concept with banks and bonds? It's a fucking mess, man. It is a mess, and it's something that we're all going to have to just deal with. We keep pushing the can down the road, kicking the can down the road, per se. And what's messed up right now is as the Fed is trying to crush demand because we know supply isn't being increased, government's not getting out of the way. So now as the Fed starts raising that discrepancy, that gap between the bond yields is too big. Those bonds at 1% aren't worth crap. Think of how many banks out there that if they need to sell their bonds to come up with cash needed for withdrawal purposes, are going to be selling at a loss. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. Oh, and you know who pays for that? Because by the way, you know, Janet Yellen did say, she's like, you know, hey, guess what? We're going to like make sure that people are whole, which is good. But the taxpayers pay for that. By the way, that was an excerpt from a live stream that we did regarding CPI data. You should really follow those live streams if you're not part of it. Thank you very much. And for those of you following the second channel, yep, I'm going to be starting my supplement journey here. I will have that linked, boom, right here so you can follow my supplement journey. Now, you want more crypto, Web3 action, XLM, XRP? That's this video right here. Supplement journey, crypto. Supplement journey, crypto. Later, everyone.